I'm too much for others to handle, but also not enough to deserve their acceptance. I'm a failure if I haven't become a wife and a mother by the time I reach a certain age. I must have the ideal body with a flat stomach, toned muscles, and no cellulite. I need to excel in all my various roles without asking for help. Can you relate to any of these thoughts? These are thoughts that are all too common for many of us. And to be honest, lately I have been in a bit of a funk with my mindset, and I've been doing a lot of work to try to turn that around. I noticed that I was getting stuck in some thought patterns that have really been reinforcing a set of beliefs in my mind, and as a result, impacting how I experience my days and my weeks. So, just in full transparency, it's been an overall feeling of just overwhelm and stress. I noticed that I was waking up feeling stressed before my day even started. I was experiencing feelings of overwhelm before I was even actually overwhelmed. My mind has just been really busy, constantly running, even when I'm trying to unwind and relax. So I've been really working on this, and I've been even working with a coach myself. And I was introduced to today's guest, Tasha, and I thought she'd be a great guest to help us all uncover some of these thoughts, some of these false narratives that may be keeping us stuck. As women, we can be our own worst enemy. So today we're going to explore common misconceptions and stereotypes that affect our self perception. False narratives really do influence every area of our life, from how we function in the workplace to the way we interact in our relationships to our view of ourselves, our worth, and our appearance. In fact, did you know the American Psychological Association did a survey in 2023 that showed that women are more likely to report feeling overwhelmed by societal pressure to maintain excellence in their homes, careers, relationships, and physical traits than men? It's probably not that surprising, but I think it's fascinating that that was shown in a survey very recently. So it's time to uncover more of these limiting beliefs so that we can break free. So let's dive in together to today's episode. I'm excited to have our guest here. Her name is Tasha Triana. She's a registered nurse turned life and purpose coach and hypnotherapist. She's also a certified yoga and meditation teacher who holds a master's degree in psychology. After experiencing severe burnout herself, she is now on a mission to teach and empower ambitious women to prioritize the relationship they have with themselves, build self awareness, and let go of limiting beliefs so that they can live their most authentic and aligned lives. So let's go ahead and dive in. Tasha, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Robin.
I am so excited to have you here, and I'm so excited to dive in to all things false narratives. And I know that you have shared you once experienced some severe burnout. Like that was a place in your life that led you to what you're doing today. So,
Yes.
can you share about that moment when you realized that maybe you were burnt out, or maybe that there were false narratives that were playing a role in your life that really needed to change, and how that led you to do what you're doing today?
Yes, I sure can. I can definitely share on that. Being burnt out pretty early on in my career as a nurse. So I used to work as a nurse in the hospital, and it is a mentality that often we're taught work hard, play hard in the medical field, for one. But I know I had a lot of my own false narratives already coming into that. And I was just really working hard. I was a new nurse. It was in my first year, giving a lot of energy, learning, and most people in the medical field too will tell you like the first 2 years you're usually pretty scared when you show up to work because there's just so much newness. There's so much to learn, there's so much to take in. You have human lives that you're responsible for, and so there's a lot going on. And at the time, I will say I was pretty good, to give myself credit, at eating well and exercising, but I the part I wasn't really addressing is like the mental and emotional and spiritual component. And so when
Yeah.
everything really hit the fan, when I really realized I was burnt out, it also allowed me, as challenging as it was a time for me to really self-reflect and look at some of the things I was doing in my life. What were some of the patterns? What was leading me down this path of burnout? And it was a lot of the, yes, false narratives, and also some of the roles I played in life. So being a perfectionist in the past, or having perfectionist tendencies, wanting to be the caretaker, being there for everyone, putting other people's needs before mine. So a lot of these patterns were really coming to the surface for me to observe. And then through that, I was able to start shifting some of those and really prioritizing my daily self care, but specifically on the emotional and spiritual component as well, to really have a more well rounded, holistic approach to my wellness.
I love that you shared that and how you had some things in place, right? Your
Hmm.
exercise, your food, like there were things that you were doing well. But that's happened to me as well, where it's like I had a lot of habits that were really great. And, without them, I probably would have been in even a worse place. But recognizing there were other stressors that were really having attacks on my system. Just out of
Hmm.
curiosity,
Yeah.
because I think it's helpful for people to sometimes hear burnout's kind of used a lot, but what did burnout look like for you? Like, how did you know you were experiencing burnout?
Good question. And oftentimes it can come, especially working in the hospital, with compassion fatigue. It's almost like a numbness in some ways, like things that might normally make you feel a certain way. It's like you just don't have certain emotions, almost apathetic or flat. But I just found myself so tired. I was losing interest kind of in the things that I normally love to do. My sleeping patterns and eating patterns were changing. I just found myself more irritable. I'm usually a pretty happy, positive person. Of course, I'm a human. I'm not like that 24/7, but just noticing a lot of changes in my behavior, the things that were really driving me. And so that was really a big indicator for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry you
Hmm.
went through that. I can relate in some ways. So, how did you get from being a nurse to what you
Yes.
do now, which is really coaching and working with women, particularly ambitious women, on uncovering some of their false narratives? So, how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, which I think is part of the fun of it. I mean, it makes sense now where I am, and I wouldn't have necessarily predicted the path I'm on, which I think is cool. But originally, before I became a nurse, I actually studied psychology, and I've always been really fascinated by the mind, human behavior, relationships, how people interact with each other. And so I first initially studied psychology. I got my master's, and at that time when I was really pursuing psychology, I was also doing some developmental field work in Costa Rica. I lived there for 3 summers. I was working in group homes and orphanages. And at the time, I was really seeing a lot of aid workers from Peace Corps, Doctors Without Borders, that type of thing. And it really inspired me to think differently about my future. I was planning to get my PhD in psychology, and it really just made me think, maybe I could switch to the medical field and be a nurse because then I could pair like the mind body connection. I could travel anywhere in the world. I love to help people. It kind of seemed like a blend of all of the things I was really passionate about. So I switched to nursing. And at the time, I had this intuition that yes, I would work in the hospital for a period of time, but that wouldn't be my kind of end all be all. I knew I needed this education, and my goal was to do Doctors Without Borders. So I studied, I did all the things, got my years in the hospital, and I applied for Doctors Without Borders. And I had this vision that I was going to live in Africa and, help people. And it was a vision of mine that I was really excited by. And when I finally applied after working in the hospital for many years, they said, your application looks great, but we need French speakers at this moment. And I was like, oh, I could do Spanish or English, but I don't know French. So I took it as it was a bit challenging to see this dream kind of not be realized in that moment, but I did take it as okay, the universe is redirecting me. And that same year in my life, it was 2017. It was a really challenging year personally. My grandma passed away, my cousin in his 20s passed away. There was a lot of just family things going on, and it really allowed me to go deeper on my own spiritual healing path and personal development path. And already at work, I had kind of become known as the wellness nurse, and people would often come to me and ask me what I was eating and for recipes and just advice. And it kind of organically grew, but through my own work with myself and just diving deeper into that realm of the mind body spirit connection, I followed my own curiosity and my passion. I became really interested in meditation, and I moved up to San Francisco from Southern California because it seemed like all the books I was reading at that time on spirituality, personal development, the authors lived in the Bay. And I thought, I think I want to move up there and really be immersed in this. And so I transferred hospitals and I just fully immersed myself. I got certified in meditation, in yoga, and energy healing, and breath work. And as I started to incorporate more mindfulness and spirituality and intentionality into my own life, it was so interesting how I could also use that in the hospital system. And by really teaching my patients the simplicity of breath, I would notice their pain go from like a level 10 to a level 5 just while I was in there for, 20, 30 seconds and assessing their pain and, looking what pain meds they could have. And so really seeing the power firsthand of the breath, on the body, on the spirit. And then working in the hospital for almost 10 years also taught me so much about mindset and the belief system and how that really impacted my patients on their healing journey. And so that I totally geek out and nerd out again on the mind. And so that really led me to go deeper into the subconscious mind and really understand how that really impacts our life and our trajectories.
Hmm. And so now you work with women primarily, right? I think
Yes.
that's
Hmm.
true. Women
Yes.
primarily, and women who, are ambitious or want to do big things or maybe have high
Hmm.
expectations of themselves. So I'd love to know, what are some of the common false narratives that you hear regularly from your clients?
Yes, a lot of them are around, I would say if we really whittled it down, they do have to do with self-worth, but we're coping in different ways. And so some of them are, I have to prioritize other people before myself. I need to give and give and give, or not giving self permission, or having really unrealistic standards that they need to show up in all of the ways and do all of the things. And yes, of course, yes, me too, right?
I'm
Right.
raising my hand. Yeah.
Yes, yes, me too, right? I always say I am my number one client, and I see a lot of these patterns in myself as well, and a lot of things that I have worked on in my own world. And so that allows me to also relate to my clients on a different and deeper level because I also understand from firsthand experience. And often a tough inner critic, that voice within, is often a tough critic.
Hmm. And so when you're working with someone, I imagine the first step, like for our community listening, right? Thinking, well, I'm not sure. Do I have false narratives? Like, where do you start? How do you first become aware if there are limiting beliefs or false narratives that are impacting your day to day life?
Yeah, such a good question. You hit on it by saying awareness, and awareness is always the first step in creating change. And with the subconscious mind, just to shine a little light there, our subconscious is responsible for creating 95% of our reality, and most of it was formed from age 0 to 7. So we are living oftentimes on automatic pilot. We just do things without even realizing it. A good example, I've definitely been there. I feel like all of us who have driven at some point in our lives have been there where we're driving a familiar path and we think, oh, I just got home and I don't even remember taking that exit or getting off the freeway. And that's our subconscious taking over. It's in a habit, it's in a routine, while our conscious mind might be thinking of a problem at work or we're going to see our best friend tomorrow. It's doing different things. And so that subconscious mind is very powerful, and it holds a lot of these beliefs that are, again, not in our awareness until we start to do this work to really take time to start to look at our patterns. The best way to really start to uncover some of these is to look at the patterns in our life or to look at what is actually going on and be really honest with ourselves, saying, most of my relationships are great, but maybe my finances aren't so great. And that's okay. And having curiosity and compassion and saying, well, what would I probably have to believe in order for that reality to be true? And that allows us to dig a bit deeper. And in terms of the subconscious, we have these thoughts. We have over 60,000 thoughts a day, research shows us. And out of those 60,000, about 90% are recycled, meaning they're repeated over and over and over. So if you can imagine, if they are related to, and some are empowering and some are disempowering, but let's say some are related to low self-worth or feeling unsafe or feeling you can't prioritize yourself or your needs don't matter, and those are running on repeat, those are the thoughts and beliefs that are really running the show on a subconscious level. And the power in that is our thoughts on repeat lead to feelings in our body, and those feelings allow us to either take action or not take action in our life, and that leads to the results or our reality. So it is a process because we can imagine, right? They've been formed from age 0 to 7. And later on, too, when we have highly emotional or traumatic events, it goes in because our subconscious mind wants to keep us safe. And ideally, safe to the subconscious is familiar. So again, we kind of get in this habit of doing the things that are familiar to us because that is defined as safety. So awareness and then doing different practices to see, what must I believe for these things to kind of be occurring?
Oh, that's so good. And, I shared in the beginning of this episode that I've been doing some reflecting on myself of just recognizing like a shift in myself over the last, I don't even know how long. It's so gradual, it's so subtle, right? But
Mm-hmm.
becoming aware, as you said, was the first step. I don't even think I recognized the way some of my thoughts had just subtly been shifting over the last few years. And for me,
Yeah.
it's kind of just fully transparently sharing. It's like coming from this place of stress and overwhelm and
Mhm.
just noticing that, like, how often thoughts and feelings of stress and overwhelm are cycling in my subconscious or
Mhm.
cycling all the time without me even recognizing. So I might not even feel stressed. I'm just going about my day, I'm doing my thing, but just bringing awareness to it has made me recognize, oh my gosh, that this little like subtle tape is playing even if I'm relaxing in a
Mhm.
bath, even if I'm
Mhm.
unwinding, even if I'm like doing something really good for myself, I still feel like it's an undercurrent, I guess is how I would say it. So,
Yeah, beautiful
yeah.
reflection and share. And I definitely can relate to that. And that's a big pattern I notice in a lot of the women I work with, the high performers, the high achieving humans, ambitious women. And for myself, same thing. It was like this undercurrent. Like an analogy I like to use is if you're in a room and the air conditioner is on and suddenly it goes off and you realize, oh, that was actually really loud. And so our thoughts are in that kind of, they're there, but we don't notice them until we start to do that awareness work to uncover them. And that's when the body and mind, they work together because, for lack of better wording, we get addicted to certain emotional states as well. And I had that overwhelm in me, and sometimes I still have to really catch it or check in with myself because it's an old pattern and
Yeah.
old belief system that is in there. And so really being able to identify that. I'm curious, do you notice where in your body you feel the overwhelm when you do catch it?
Yeah, all here in the middle. So usually my
Mm-hmm.
stomach, like up high, nausea, like when it's intense.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it's more subtle, I just feel like it's kind of anywhere in my like chest and belly area, just
Mm-hmm.
right there.
And
Yeah.
great awareness. And I love that because for all of us, overwhelm, we might have some similarities, but it might be different. When I catch myself in overwhelm, I really feel it like in my back and shoulders and chest. And I realize I'm holding my breath oftentimes. And I'm like,
Oh,
oh,
same.
I'm holding
Yes.
my breath. Mm-hmm.
Holding my
Mm-hmm.
breath is a big one. I actually wrote about it in my book because I realized even when I was working how much I was holding my breath, like going through
Yes.
my inbox, doing different things. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't even realize it until I realized it. And then I noticed how tense my muscles were. And
Right.
we're in the nervous system. We talk about that a lot here, right? Because all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden you're restricting oxygen, you're sending your nervous system
Yes.
into this place where I'm
Fight or
unsafe.
flight. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And then it just
Mm-hmm.
is this spiral that you can be in without even noticing. That's the crazy part.
Yes, and amazing awareness. Same, I would catch myself doing that too. And our breath, as you mentioned, is one of the first things to shift when we are feeling unsafe, when we're in fight or flight, when we're in stress mode. And so bringing awareness to our breath, or some of us we do have a good connection already with our body and we're able to start noticing, my stomach feels a little nauseous right now. Let me see if I can catch where my thoughts are. And usually they're working together. One can affect the other, vice versa. And that's how you can also start to develop that awareness. I had a client recently saying, yeah, I feel this really constricted feeling when, certain things happen. And she started building more awareness, noticing that constricted feeling in her chest. And we were able to really get in and start to uncover, okay, what's down there? What is the deeper layer?
Yeah, that's so great. And I think that's, we do a lot of work at Lindywell about just helping to train that mind body connection, whether it's through
Mm-hmm.
Pilates or through breath work. And when I share that, it's just literally becoming aware of how you feel in your body. So many of us are so
Yes.
disconnected from even feeling anything in our body that I always find some people can answer that question. It depends very much on your style. Like either I know exactly where I feel it in my body, or I literally have no idea where I feel it in my body. So we always think of it as like a muscle. You just need to practice using
Yes.
it. And some
Mm-hmm.
people I imagine feel it first there. Like I don't feel it first there. I first feel the emotion. And then I can
Mm-hmm.
quickly tap into like, if I'm feeling this in my body, where am I feeling it? As opposed to, recognizing the stomach ache first and
Mm-hmm.
then, so it's just so interesting how connected it is. And I'm sure you see that all the time.
Yes, it's fascinating. It just intrigues me so much, this intelligence we have in our body. And, ultimately, again, our subconscious mind wants to keep us surviving. That's what it cares about. And it thrives on predictability. So that's why we often go revert again back to the past.
Yeah.
And then we create this lens or maybe even a fear that's not actually happening, but we're set up for that old survival mechanism. Like if the tiger is chasing us, but now the tiger might be a deadline or a work interview, or you got in a fight with your partner, it's a different kind of stress. Ultimately, we're okay. We're not going to die, usually in those situations, but our brain reacts as if it does because it's trying to predict from past experiences to keep us safe and keep us alive. And so we really, default again to that familiar zone. I don't even say comfort zone anymore because sometimes
Mm.
the, in quotes, comfort zone isn't actually comfortable. You might be in a relationship that's not serving you or a job that's not serving you, or maybe you're about to move and, that would serve you better. But again, we default into that familiar place because it's viewed as safe.
Yeah. So how do we break free of that? So how do we start to shift? I know awareness is one step. And then where do we go from there?
One thing, yes, good question. One thing I also like to pair in with the awareness piece is allowing yourself to come from a place of compassionate curiosity.
Mm.
That gives us a lot of space. Like, my chest is feeling tight in this moment. Wonder what's going on versus, making it wrong or bad, just observing like, this is information. Okay, what can I do with this or what is it telling me? So I think coming from that place is really helpful. It gives us some space there. And then as we start to build the awareness, maybe we're able to notice these thoughts that we have in conjunction with feelings in our body. Maybe we can't yet notice it. And so then I would invite the person to say, okay, we know how we don't want to feel, which is important information, but we don't necessarily want to hang out there. We also want to focus on how do we want to feel? And so, say, for example, with you, let's ask, how would you like to feel instead of overwhelmed?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot about this. I'd like to feel
Mm-hmm.
peaceful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And do you have a place that you love to go or an area or a way you really can tap into your peaceful energy?
Yeah, when I do visualizations or things, I have a couple of like visuals of places in my mind
Mm-hmm.
where
Love
I
it.
can picture being completely relaxed, with people I love and just having that like deep sense of peace, not the rushed, anxious feeling.
Love it. And so then in that moment, again, because most likely it's not an actual physical threat to our survival,
Right.
it's again like some kind of work deadline or
Yeah.
usually, right?
Yes, it's a
Usually.
work thing. It's a
Yes.
busy schedule. It's not life threatening.
Yes. And so then in that moment, I call it a pattern interrupt. And that is when you pause, you can take a breath. And one time, you might only get one breath in. That's great because we're in that habit and sometimes it just hijacks us and takes us really quickly. So we might notice, oh my gosh, I'm feeling this overwhelm. Okay, let me take a deep breath. And that might be it for that time or for multiple times. And that's okay because you're already starting to create space. Then the
Hmm.
next, later on, as you start to develop again, this muscle of pausing, taking a breath, then later it might be taking more breaths, or then telling yourself, I'm safe in this moment, or let me visualize and picture being in one of my favorite spots. Because our mind, our brain is such a powerful tool. We can visualize worst case scenario, or we can visualize best case scenario or what we desire. But again, our brain is often in that predictability, the past, working from the past things that have happened instead of the future. But if we have that future that we desire, we can also use that to help us create peace and calm, whatever that is that we wanted to feel in our body.
That's so good. I have been practicing that. So that's just like really affirming and encouraging to hear that. And I love how we talk about grace over guilt here at Lindy
Hmm.
Wells. So I love how you're sharing that from a self-compassionate approach, right? Because I know, again, as someone who raised my hand to also be like, I have really high expectations of myself. And I think as women, a lot of us do.
Hmm.
And even if it's not in your career, it's maybe in your role in your family or your community or your church or I think ambition can sometimes be like matched with career driven, but ambitious can look different no matter where you're at in life. It could be to be the best musician, and we
Yeah.
as women, I think, have a lot of those on us. So just hearing you kind of talk through how to create that awareness and that space for us, I
Hmm.
think is really helpful. So before we wrap up, what is like one of the things that you just wish every woman knew or every one of your clients knew about these false narratives and how to really get to a place where we feel like we are living out of the best version of ourselves?
Yeah, there's a lot of things I could and would love to say. I think
Yeah.
number one, treating yourself with compassion, really coming from that place of compassion. And I love to empower women to really prioritize the relationship they have with themselves, because that is the longest relationship that we will all have from the minute we
Mhm.
arrive to the minute we leave this planet. And we spend the most amount of time with ourselves. So doing this work and being compassionate, we can start to shift that inner narrative as well. I know my inner voice used to be almost like a drill sergeant, like we got to do this and very, very, very bossy, I would say, in my mind. And when I really realized that, I was able to start shifting. And sometimes that little boss will come out, but overall, I have really shifted to a more compassionate way of speaking to myself. And sometimes it can feel challenging. When women have difficulty there, I often recommend get out a picture of your younger self, like your inner child, your little girl, maybe age 5 or 6. Put it on your desk. How would you speak to her? Because that little girl still lives within you. And
Mm,
most of us, it would be so hard to be mean to a little kid, yet, especially if it's our little version. And so really building that relationship and thinking, okay, this is the voice I would love to use. And then also knowing it's a process, it's a journey, and it's okay. One day it might be really easy to show up, and another day it might feel really challenging. And it will look different each day. It doesn't have to look the same. So, really just
mm,
having that grace and compassion and knowing we're all human. And that
mhm.
that it's okay to maybe not show up in the in quotes ideal way that we think we should.
Yes, because that then right there is the more pressure upon ourselves, right?
Yes.
To even in doing
Yes.
the work, to then all of a sudden be like,
Mhm.
well, I need to do this perfectly,
Mhm.
the healing work and the so I appreciate that. One more question I heard you just share,
Yeah.
prioritizing your relationship with yourself. Can you get like
Mhm.
really practical? What does that look like for you? Because I think that's something that we love to say, we know it's important, but what does that look
Mhm.
like to you in your life, practically speaking?
Yes, of course. I think this looks different for all of us. And I love this question because we have so much information about, what self-care is, what it should be, what it looks like. And this is where I say, self-care can look different from person to person, and it can even look different from day to day with the same person. And I'll share a personal example because I think I really learn from stories, and I think a lot of listeners do too. But back in the day when I was really in my super productive, overachieving days and I was in nursing school, I was training for a full marathon, doing all the things. And well, actually, it was fast forward. It was when I was already working as a nurse. I was doing another marathon and I had just worked 3 12-hour shifts. And the next morning, I was, supposed to be going on a long run to train for the race. And I woke up and in my body, she was tired and she said, let's stay in bed, let's rest. And my mind overshadowed that and said, today is our day to run. We've been working, we're on this training schedule, and we need to get out there. And so I disregarded my intuition and my body. I went out on that run. And to this day, it's the only run I've ever fallen on. And that was my hard earned lesson that luckily I was okay, got a little scrape. But then I thought, time to walk home and turn around. And this lesson always lives within me. And so that was a day that, yes, movement is something I love to do and a way I love to prioritize myself. But that day, actually, rest was the way I could have prioritized myself. And maybe it was reading a book or journaling, doing something that was a little bit more low key in terms of impact on my body. And so this is where taking time, spending time with yourself, is so important because you learn what are the things that are self care for you. And I define that as what nurtures you physically, spiritually, emotionally, all of these ways that can really charge up your battery. And so for some people, that might be listening to music and dancing, that might be journaling, it might be going to a coffee shop and reading a book, and really just taking that time to tune into yourself as you build this relationship with yourself to say, yeah, what would best serve me today? So I think
Mm,
it's a bit different from day to day and from person to person.
right. That's great advice. And I even hear the importance of that slowing down, no matter what, even if you are going for a walk, but so many of us reach for our phones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or reach for more noise or a show or a podcast episode or another
Yes.
thing. Nothing against podcast episodes, nothing against Instagram. We love those
Yeah.
things in moderation, but I think that those pull us away from what we need and away from paying attention to ourselves and what we really need. So just hearing you say that is like, gosh, even boundaries around some of those numbing out maybe behaviors that we tend to do that actually draw us further away from prioritizing what we really need.
Yes, I love that. And everything is a tool, the way I look at it. We could have a pair of scissors and that's a tool. We could use it to create an art project or we could use it to hurt someone. It's the same tool, it just has different intentions. And same thing, say, with social media. It's a wonderful tool for connecting, for learning, for meeting new people. And
Mm-hmm.
it can also put us into our false narratives as well if we go into comparison or not enoughness or worthiness. And so having boundaries around that and also noticing, okay, I just spent, 40 minutes on Instagram. How do I feel in my body? Or
Mm-hmm.
when am I reaching for it? And so having boundaries around it that help and nourish you are really, really important. I log off Instagram every weekend on Saturday and Sunday. And just in those 2 days, I can notice such a shift in my energy. Yet I also love Instagram because I can
Yeah.
connect with amazing humans. So it's just
Yeah.
what works for you and what honors you and your well being.
Yes. That's great advice. Tasha, thank you so much for being here. This is such a great conversation. I feel like we could go for hours.
Same. Thank
Um,
you so much for having me. I know we really
yeah,
could.
we really could. But again, thank you for sharing your expertise and your wisdom. And do you mind sharing if you have a website or somewhere where our guests could find you if they want to get to know you better?
Yes, my website is thenurturednurse.co. And on Instagram, I'm at the nurtured nurse. And I'm usually active on there except for the weekend. So you can reach out, message me. And yeah, that's the best way to connect.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. It really hit me right where I'm at. I'm in a place where I'm becoming more and more aware of some of these narratives and thoughts that are keeping me stuck and really, honestly, sucking joy out of my day. So I am dedicated to repairing some of those thoughts and really starting to put myself into a different pattern. So I hope this episode was helpful for you. We actually have a blog on our website that dives into this even in more detail. So if false narratives is something you want to reflect on even more, I encourage you to check out our blog over at lindywell.com, and I'll put a link in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would love for you to leave a review wherever you're listening to your podcast. So, especially in Apple, if you could just leave a quick review, hopefully 5 stars. And we're actually doing a giveaway for people who leave reviews. All you have to do is rate and review the podcast, take a quick screenshot, and then email it to hello@lindywell.com. We'll be selecting one lucky winner per week to get a very generous gift card. Also, if you're not a member of Lindywell yet, you're going to want to join us. You can go to lindywell.com to start your free trial. And when you do, you're going to get free access to our app. And in our app, we have everything you need to really strengthen this mind body connection, like we talked about in today's episode. More than 350 Pilates workouts that you can do from home, breathwork videos designed to help you calm your mind, calm your nervous system, and even get into some of these patterns and redirection habits that we talked about today. So just check the link in the show notes or head to lindywell.com, and hopefully I'll see you on your mat soon. And I'll see you back here for another episode very soon. Bye.